What's up, my Wizards Dev? Mtg Magic. We like it. Today we got some more big boy Ikoria spoilers for you, except there's not too many big boys today, actually. It's mostly like relatively tame common and uncommons with a couple of freaking haymakers that we'll get to. But before we actually jump into it, just remember to do all the YouTube stuff. Like the video, subscribe if you're new, hit the bell for the notifications, go to Patreon, $1 a month, all I ask, vote on the next decks in the season, blah, blah, blah. You came to see cards. Let's go ahead and get to them. Alright, so we'll start the day, as usual, with some of the, lower impact, common and uncommon stuff that looks good for limited. And in some cases, there are some standard applications for these cards, but I don't think we're going to be seeing them on the top tables anytime soon. I'd rather start with stuff like Go for Blood and Thwart the Enemy. Go for Blood actually looks pretty decent, just a 2-mana fight effect in red that you can cycle, and that's great for limited. It's a removal, so you'll probably play it when you get it. And even if you can't remove a creature at that time, well, you don't have any creatures, whatever, just cycle it. It seems great, honestly. And if there's any standard deck, I've said this before, that wants a critical mass of cycling things that only cost 1 to cycle, or perhaps even in other formats, the New Perspectives deck might want this. And occasionally you might even cast it to remove a creature. It all depends. So it actually looks fantastic for a deck like that, but we'll see if a deck like that exists in standard. Now, Thwart the Enemy is just a 3-mana fog effect in green, so do we have enough of these now for Turbo Fog to be a thing in standard again? Let's hope not. Let's really hope not, but let's move on to a story told in 3 parts with Forbidden Friendship, Capture Spear, and Cathartic Reunion. 2 out of 3 of these are reprints, and one of them is a very good reprint. Can you guess which one? Yeah, Cathartic Reunion is pretty ridiculous. This could make an arc like Phoenix deck playable in standard again. That's possible. It also makes, I think her name is Riel, the 3-mana Is It Legend, that whenever you discard a card, you draw that many cards. It could make that card playable. I was just asking when I reviewed that card, like, are there good enough ways to discard cards? Everyone in the comment section said cycling. I'm not sure that that's effective enough, honestly. You cast Riel on turn 3, and then on turn 4 you start cycling things and drawing cards, and then you get Embercleaved to death. So I'm just not really sure that that's effective, but Cathartic Reunion, definitely a good boost to that card, because you discard 2, but you effectively draw 5 for 2 mana, and that might be good enough to see a little bit of play right there. But Cathartic Reunion also great in Reanimator decks, and things that want to jumpstart. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons to play Cathartic Reunion. It's just a step up from Tormenting Voice. It's an amazing card, and it will probably see some amount of standard play, because it usually sees some play. Capture Spear, also a reprint, just blue removal. Sometimes it's good and limited. And then Forbidden Friendship is 2 mana for a sorcery it's kind of like a Dragon Fodder or a Raise the Alarm. I guess it's more like a Dragon Fodder. Well, I guess either way, right? I mean, basically it's a 2-mana thing that makes 2 1/1 tokens, but you trade instant speed on, like, Raise the Alarm for sorcery speed and haste on one of the creatures, which might actually be really, really cool. If there's a tokens deck that wants to get really aggressive, this is a sweet piece for it. Or just any kind of deck that wants a large amount of creatures out for whatever reason, Convoke or something like that. So I actually kind of like this card, and I think that it could see play in at least budget decks, or maybe like very, very specific standard decks that focus on token synergy. But either way, it's nice, but I'm not really seeing too much action out of it. Now I'll move on to Sanctuary Lockdown and Exuberant Wolf Bear, which is awesome. Sanctuary Lockdown is 3 mana, 2 and a white for an enchantment. Humans you control get +1/+1, and you can pay 2 and tap 2 untap humans you control to tap target creature an opponent controls. So another good, like, human payoff. This one at the lower rarities for draft play. If you want to build the humans deck, you can. But I'm interested in whether or not Glorious Anthem is a good card. We just saw Banalish Marshal. That costs 3 white, so very, very prohibitive, but it also attacked for 3 in your aggro deck, and that actually made a huge difference. A lot of people thought that being a creature was a downside on Benny Mars, but it turns out it was actually an upside 90% of the time. And on Sanctuary Lockdown, I'm not sure that you get those same kind of benefits. It's a little bit harder to remove, but in this standard, people are more and more often playing enchantment and artifact removal in their main decks, especially enchantment removal. So I'm not too sure that it's worth skipping your 3rd turn for this and then pumping more mana into later if you want to get defensive, but it is nice to have an offensive tool for offensive decks that allows you to sink mana and get a defensive if you have to, if the board stalls out. Or maybe at the end of your opponent's turn, you tap down 2 other things and you got a better attack step. It could work, especially again in the humans deck in limited, but whether it works in standard, I actually doubt, because I'm not sure it's going to be worth skipping your turn 3, but at least it gives you an Anthem effect when it comes down, and we've seen Anthem effects. There was one in Battle for Zendikar, there was one in, I think, Shadows over Innistrad, that were enchantments on Anthem effects, and they saw very sparing standard play, but still saw some play here and there, so it's possible to see some play. Now, Exuberant Wolf Bear, cool stuff you can do with it, but again, I think this is mostly just limited. 4 mana for a 4/4 Wolf Bear, that makes sense. And whenever Exuberant Wolf Bear attacks, you may change the base power and toughness of target human you control to Wolf Bear's power and toughness till end of turn. So, a couple of cool things. Obviously, any pump or Anthem effects or auras that you put onto this will increase its power, thus increasing the power of whatever attacks. So that could be really good. There's a few things that this works with specifically. The dumb one is Crunch Wrangler, which will get a +1/+1 counter whenever you play Exuberant Wolf Bear, and then maybe the next turn you play something else. Crunch Wrangler gets another +1/+1 counter. Well, you can change the base power and toughness of Crunch Wrangler to 4/4 when Wolf Bear swings, but it's got +1/+1 counters on it. This works really well with any human that can get +1/+1 counters, because you change its base power to +4 to 4/4, and the counters will still count. So there's a couple of things you can do with that. But I also really like Sir Farron the Hinge Hammer with this. If you stack the triggers correctly, you can do some really, really cool stuff. So I like some of the implications of this card, but it's probably nowhere near good enough for standard play. There's way better green 4-drops. Even if you're trying to, play a sort of human's conceit for this card, it actually gets kind of tough to do that, because there's not that many humans that this really works with that you'd want to play in your standard deck. But in limited, this probably works fine enough. We'll just put it that way. But I'll move on to, I guess, the last couple of uncommons that I want to review without showing my face. Now, full disclosure, there is at least one or two. There's two, I think, uncommons that I'm going to show my face for, because I think they're that good. But these next couple are I'm on the fence about them, and I'm not entirely convinced they're good cards. One is Lordrakkus. This is 3 mana, 1 a blue and a red for a 2/3 lizard beast with mutate. 2 mana. It's 2 Izzet hybrid. And whenever this creature mutates, return target instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. That's actually really, really good text. But having to mutate is actually kind of a big thing, because you want a bunch of instants and sorceries in your deck, but you also have to have creatures to mutate this onto, and then creatures to further mutate it later. It seems like you're really mixing up you're splitting the creature and instant and sorcery conceits too much with a card like this, especially considering you probably already want to play Goblin Electromancer, some other stuff, and you just can't play too many creatures in a deck that's really heavy on instants and sorceries. However, being able to it kind of feels like a Snapcaster. You cast it for 2 mana. That seems really, really good. So if you can make it into create your own Snapcaster, then yes, it's obviously a ridiculous Magic card, but it also kind of feels like an Eternal Witness, just a little bit, type is restricted, but any creature like this is usually decently playable, but I've just got sort of some qualms about this. I think that the casting cost is a little bit much, but you're never going to play it. That's the thing. You're almost never going to play it out of your hand. You're very likely going to mutate it onto something else, in which case the mutate cost is very good, but is it going to be good enough is my question. Bringing back a Casualties of War late game, if you wanted to play 4 colors, seems really, really good, but just bringing back ops and stuff doesn't seem quite as good to me. But maybe you're getting back Cathartic Reunions or Scorching Dragonfires or something. It's possible this is a fantastic card, but it requires an awful lot of setup, and again, I think that the deck building concessions are split, and they're at odds with each other with this card. So I'm a little bit worried about Drakkus. I think there's better ways you can create value in Standard right now. But aside from that, let's move. But I could be wrong. This is one of those. These next cards that I talk about here are going to be cards that I'm more than willing to be wrong about. Please give me your opinion on them in the comment section. But up next is Savai Thunderlion. This is 2 mana, a red and a white, for a 3/2 elemental cat. So I have to like it because it's a cat. But whenever you cycle a card, you may pay 2. If you do, Savai Thunderlion gets 2 damage or deals 2 damage to target creature. You gain 2 life. So you get a little Helix on your Thundercat here, or a sort of Lightning Helix that only hits creatures, can't hit players or planeswalkers, which is kind of hurtful. And I think that this card is a bomb in limited, but I'm not quite sure that it makes Standard playability. It can be shocked, it can be dead-weighted, it can be disfigured, all that kind of stuff applies. And I don't necessarily love that. I've been talking to someone on the I think it's on the Spike subreddit about this card, and someone ended up saying something like, they can just, you play this on turn 2 and then they shock it and play a 1-drop on their turn 2, and you lost a lot of value. And someone's like, well, that's really contrived. And that's when I came in like, it's not contrived, actually. For Mono Red as a deck, they play shock, so it's not hard to imagine a world where they shock Fervent Champion on turn 2. And they've completely taken over the board in the game at that point. So I don't think it's contrived to say, they might remove your creature before you get any value from it. And that could easily happen with a 2 toughness creature. that also requires you to pump more mana into it to get actual value, and requires you to have cards with cycling in your hand to get value out of them. But if you do have cards with cycling in your hand and you cycle them, then it requires you, again, to put more mana into it, so it kind of takes over your turns. You can't really do anything on turn 3 other than cycle a thing and kill a creature, which is decent, but you kind of want to expand your board state a little bit more, I would imagine, on most turns. Again, in Limited, I find this amazing, but in Standard, I'm just not sure that it's quite there to really, you know, maybe it's great against the mono red aggro match. You know, I've already said that deck carries shock, so you might get blown out on turn 2 or 3. It's entirely possible, but at the same time, it's entirely possible that if you're able to untap with it even once and you have cyclers in your hand, you just kill Scorch Spitters and Fervent Champions and Robbers of the Rich like it's nobody's business, gaining life back. So you could take over the board with this card against mono red. It's possible, but against other decks, you know, like Ramp, the various flavors of Ramp right now and all the various flavors of Control, this card does almost nothing. So I'm not actually sure that this is truly a standard playable card for a lot of different reasons. But again, in Limited, this looks like a ridiculous bomb card that you want every copy of. Now, there is one more card I'll talk about in this segment of the video, and that's In One Bite. This is just 1 white mana for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, tap an untapped creature you control. Exile target tapped creature. Put a +1/+1 counter on the creature tapped to cast this spell. So you have to both pay the cost and convoke it for one, basically. So it requires you to have a creature out. It also requires that its target is tapped. It also is a sorcery. So I got some issues, but 1 mana to exile a thing is good. I think that's probably pretty good, you know. Again, this seems decent against mono red, where it's got great targets like Anax and occasionally the Phoenix. Both those seem great, but obviously the Anax and the Phoenix have to have attacked you. That might not be a great situation. Again, it's not instant speed, so you can't just like play this on whatever they're targeting with Embercleave. That would be amazing. Like freaking amazing. But it just, you know, 1 mana to exile a creature, that seems great. I'm usually a little bit wary of these, you know, kill that tapped thing spells, but this might be one of the better ones we've seen in a while, despite the fact that it requires you to have a creature. I still think that it's fantastic, and if you do have a creature, not only do you go up on board state, but you get your creature gets a little bit bigger, which is really, really sweet, too. So, I mean, I really like this card. It just has to be in very specific aggro decks, and even then, you have to be in, you know, very specific aggro matchups. So maybe it goes really well with creatures that have vigilance, I guess, because you get to swing in and then second main phase do this. So that, you know, it could work in that way. It also kind of works well in decks that have Teferi and can cast it at instant speed, consequently, but a lot of Teferi decks don't play that many creatures, so there's that. So I have some qualms about it because it has so many requirements. Creature has to be tapped. It's a sorcery. You have to have a creature, and that creature probably can't attack that turn. All that, you know, it seems like it's really getting beaten into the ground by the requirements. But 1 mana is a steal as far as rate goes. So there are definitely specific decks that might want to play this card. Well, since the rares are a little bit less impressive than some of the uncommons today, I'll go ahead and talk about a couple of these rares. Here's Fronland Felidar right here. Another cat. Like cat theme today. I like that. It's 4 mana, 2, a green, and a white for a 3/5 cat beast with vigilance. Creatures you control with vigilance have 1 tap target creature. We're also seeing a theme in the last couple of cards of things that work well with vigilance creatures. So break out them 4 mana Johnnies from War of the Spark. I doubt it. This does work really well, though, with animated Nissalands. So you got to remember that, too. You know, go ahead and swing in with your Nissalands before they declare blockers. Tap their guys down. Seems like a pretty good application, but I still doubt the card's going to see too much play. But it is nice to have a Vigilance Lord. We saw a Menace Lord the other day. So cool to have, like, Lords, I guess we'll call them that, for these abilities that are kind of underappreciated. But here's a 4 mana cat that I really like right here. This is Cub Warden. 4 mana, 3 and a white for a 3/5 cat with mutate 2 and 2 white. So almost the same, just slightly harder to mutate it. It's got lifelink, and whenever this creature mutates, create 2 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink. So it's a mutate creature that creates more creatures for you to mutate more stuff onto. It seems cool, but still, I would say this, again, a 4 mana, 3/5 lifelink. Pretty good stats, you know. 5 toughness survives all kinds of stuff in the format right now. Plus a 3/5 lifelink is actually a really good body against, like, you know, mono red aggro decks and stuff. It's not a bad card. It's not a bad Magic card. But again, I highly doubt it's going to see standard play in the face of, cards that are just kind of better than it at the same mana cost. Like, we've seen Luminous Broodmoth in this set. If I'm paying 4 mana for a white creature, it's probably that one and not necessarily this one, especially considering that white is the color that Mutate is supported by, like, the least. That didn't come out. You know what I'm saying? Like, white is the least supported color for Mutate. I think that's the way I wanted to word that. But still, I guess you could just mutate this onto something. And in that case, even if you never mutate anything again, you're getting 5 power worth of stats, 7 toughness, 3 bodies. You're actually only getting 2 bodies because you mutated this onto something. So you're technically only getting 2 bodies. But you know what I'm saying. So that actually, it could work out, but again, I don't think it's quite at the level of playability it needs to be. But we'll see if the stat line is enough, because it might be. Oh yeah, and also cats. I'm doomed to like it because cats. But let's move on to some of the other cards from today. And we'll actually go back down in rarity for just a spell and talk about Evasion Protocol. Is that the name of this card right here? Yep, Evasion Protocol. I was looking at the untranslated version. But this card looks really cool. This is 1 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever you cycle a card, you may pay 1. If you do, exile target creature or artifact you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So it's an Astral Slide or an Astral Drift or whatever, it's one of those, but it's in blue, and it costs less on the front end, but then you have to pay mana to do it. It's whatever, it's fine. This actually looks great, because especially considering it's in the color with Agent of Treachery. Jeez, right? That seems fantastic. So in the cycling deck, this could be great if there are enough creatures with a good enter the battlefield trigger to make this worth it. And I think there very well may be. Even if this isn't a top table card, I still think that it's worth talking about seriously, because that is a very good ability. It's going to end up costing a lot of mana because you're going to pay whatever you pay in to cycle the card in the first place, and then you pay an extra 1. But again, if you're getting an Elite Guard Mage or Agent of Treachery, enter the battlefield trigger again, then it's going to be well worth it to pay that 1 mana. 1 mana. I mean, come on, it's not that bad. Oh, by the way, you cycled, so you get to draw too. It's not like you're just paying mana for nothing. So 2 mana to go ahead and get started on board with this seems fantastic to me. But at some point, you have to play creatures, right? Let's say, I guess you could always play this turn 2. Turn 3, like Deputy of Detention, maybe, or like, what's another good 3-drop in that deck? There aren't that many good 3-drops in that deck. The Thassa deck. I guess you could always do the 3-colored one and play like Risen Reef, right? And then like next turn you cycle something, blink your Risen Reef or your Charming Prince or your Detention, your Deputy Detention, whatever. Again, it's mostly when we get into the later turns and we're blinking stuff like Guard Mage and Agent of Treachery that I start getting really excited, but I'm sure that there are plenty of fun ETB triggers to repeat with this card. But for our next card, I have to go back a little bit. This card is about 30 hours old. It got previewed over the weekend. This is Lava Brink Adventurer right here. This is 2 and a white for a 3/3 human soldier. And when it ETBs, you choose odd or even. Zero's even. Lava Brink Adventurer has protection from the chosen converted mana costs. I guess you could blink this if you wanted to with that last card. That might... Maybe, possibly, it could be a thing. I doubt it, though. But if you wanted to change what it has protection from in a snap, you could do that. But just giving it protection from odd or even actually seems very good. That seems very, very good to me. And it's statted at least somewhat appropriately. 3 mana, 3/3. You can't sneeze at that. I guess it's at least on curve. It's not the stat line it used to be. But it's still okay. And just having protection from goodness, all the removal spells and creatures at, either 2 or 4 casting cost or 3 and 5 seems great. Also 1, having protection from like Knight of the Ebon Legion might be decent sometimes. Being able to swing through a Cauldron Familiar when you name 1, that might be good. So, actually I'm talking myself into it. I'm just really not sure what deck plays it. And I hate that you can't mutate stuff onto it because it's a human. That hurts a little bit because if you can mutate stuff onto this and it has protection from spells, it seems good. But at the same time, I still think this might be a nice little aggro creature that might have a problem finding its deck. But its deck might be green-white auras, because a lot of the decks, or a lot of the cards that you want to put on it, a lot of the auras that you'd want to place on it are 2 mana. So you just choose protection from odd, and you're not really missing out on much, because you can still put like Setessan Training and all that glitters on it. So maybe possibly that, but we'll have to see. Either way, I think a creature that has protection from like 50% of the cards in any given game is pretty good. But let's go back to the uncommons. For easily the strongest uncommon of the day, this could have been a rare, and I don't think anyone would have blinked an eye. This is Cunning Nightbonder right here. It costs 2 mana, both in Dimir hybrids. It's a 2/2 human rogue with flash, and spells you cast with flash cost 1 less to cast and can't be countered. There's so many things this worked with that I had to make notes on my phone. I had to make notes on my phone. Now, first of all, Brineborn Cutthroat, that works pretty well, and people have already pointed out that if you get this down on turn 2, then on turn 3 you have access to either Brineborn Cutthroat or Fairy Vandal, but you still have the mana to play either Quench or Essence Scatter, and that is actually really, really important in all flavors of Flash deck. But this is good in pretty much any flavor of Flash deck, because there are at least 3, if not 4. Right now, there's the blue-red and Simic Flash decks that people are most familiar with. But then there's just mono blue Flash, which looks particularly strong in the upcoming format. Based on this card, a few other cards that already existed, and the next card we'll talk about, mono blue Flash is looking pretty decent. But there's also blue-black Flash, which obviously this card facilitates, and even Sultai Flash is a thing. So this just goes in way too much. But the Brineborn Cutthroat into 2-mana counterspell thing on turn 3 is something people have been talking about. But I've already mentioned Cutthroat, Fairy Vandal, Threnody Stinger. That's a thing you could do in the mono blue deck. This also helps you curve into Thrix a little bit quicker. And then from there, you can get crazy stuff. Like if you have both cards on the table, both this and Thrix, you can get things like Voracious Great Shark for 3 mana. Seems good. Even if you don't have a Thrix out, this makes Voracious Great Shark only cost 4. Makes it a much, much better card. So there's that. There's also Dream Eater, which this reduces the cost of as well. That could be good. Again, especially if you have a Thrix out as well. You get double layers of uncounterability and 2 cost reduction effects. So you get a 4-mana Dream Eater. That's fantastic. Lockmere Serpent. Say that again. Also good if you have a Thrix out as well, but you don't have to. This just helps you curve into a Lockmere Serpent a little bit faster and can't be countered. Blacklance Paragon only costs 1 mana. Wildborn Preserver only costs 1 mana. And then Nightpack Ambusher, too, only costs 3 mana. Which I'm a little ambivalent on for a couple of reasons. The pros there is that Simic Flash was already playing like Growth Spiral at the end of their opponent's turn 2, and that made it to where they could get a turn 3 Nightpack Ambusher pretty easily. You could argue that this is kind of copies 5/8 of Growth Spiral for that purpose. You play it at the end of your opponent's turn 2, and it makes it a little bit easier for you to get a turn 3 Nightpack Ambusher. That said, this is 2 blue, Nightpack Ambusher is 2 green, so it might be a little awkward to do that some of the time. And that's going to stop you, again, some percentage of the time. So I'll worry about that. But this does technically make Nightpack Ambusher only cost 3 mana, which is a huge deal on curve if you have the mana to make it work. That said, this doesn't make cards like Frilled Mystic any better. So I'm really thinking this might be more a mono blue Flash tool. Or again, blue-red Flash might be really, really decent with this card. It's already a fine deck, but now your Embercleaves can't be countered. And that might make a freaking huge difference. But there's all kinds of stuff this does. Things like Brazen Borrower now cost only 4 mana to both play and then play the creature half of. Play the spell half, then the creature half of. And that's just huge cost reduction on a low-cost 2-drop creature with at least a serviceable body and the flash ability and uncounterability on top of all of that. This is a fantastic bear that's going to help out multiple archetypes, for better or worse. But my favorite card of the day right here, old SDO, Sea Dasher Octopus, is 3 mana, 1 and 2 blue for a 2/2 Octopus with Mutate 1 and a blue. This too has Flash, so it works pretty well with the card I was just talking about. And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Now, this doesn't look super insane, but it's kind of Curious Obsession. It's a little bit Curious Obsession. It costs double what Curious Obsession costs, unless, of course, you have that last card we talked about out, because it should also reduce the Mutate cost of this, given that Mutate is casting the spell. So you've got one of those out, you're mutating this for 1 blue mana, which is Curious Obsession. If you mutate it onto a 1/1, you're getting that same +1 bonus that Curious Obsession gives. But the problem is, the good thing is you don't have to swing with the creature every turn or lose it, the way Curious Obsession is worded. So this kind of, I'd say it's better than Curious Obsession for a few reasons. It's going to boost some of the creatures that you play it on, so there's that. It's great with things like Brineborn Cutthroat, because Brineborn Cutthroat gets counters on it, so you can effectively give Brineborn Cutthroat a +1 toughness boost, which is kind of nice some of the time. It might actually work against, removal spells like Shock or Scorching Dragonfire every now and again. So keep that in mind. But in any case, just being able to flash this onto something, you couldn't do that with Curious Obsession, could you? Flash this onto something during combat, wait till a creature goes unblocked and then play it Ninja of the Deep Hours style. It kind of feels like that card. flash it in, mutate it onto something, guarantee that you draw a card. Curious Obsession doesn't even do that. So it just looks like a freaking boffo card to me. Oh, and something else it does that Curious Obsession doesn't do, it can just be a 2/2. It can just be an Ophidian. Although Ophidian wasn't a 2/2, it was a 1/3. But it can be a 3-mana 2/2, draw a card when it does combat damage, which is actually not terrible sometimes. If your opponent doesn't have any creatures or something like that, you're up against control deck, this could actually be just great on its own. In Curious Obsession, you could not just play as a threat or a blocker, and this you can. So there's so much flexibility on this. A lot of people have asked, can you mutate as an instant if the card has flash? Yes, absolutely. I've kind of already covered that by saying you can use it as a combat trick, but still, just to shore that up, yes, you can mutate this with flash. At instant speed. That's crazy. Whether you're combining with the card we just talked about, the other 2-mana card, or not, this is going to be a very, very strong card and might make, again, just like the last card we talked about, again, might make these mono blue tempo and flash strategies a little bit more viable. So I've got really high hopes for the Octopus. We might actually have a playable Octopus. I was super excited about Nadir Kraken when Nadir Kraken got spoiled. And that hasn't really worked out, and we've all tried to make it work, and we just need to admit that it doesn't. But this, on the other hand, has all the hallmarks of a fantastic Magic card. But wait, there's more. At least one more card today. Now, as I was editing, Wizards decided to preview 4 more new cards, but 3 of them are commons and uncommons that don't look particularly noteworthy whatsoever, but they've also slipped in Lurrus of the Dream Den, another one of these legendary companion creatures. This one looks really, really good. I've only read it once. It's only been around for like 30 seconds, but I'll try to do it justice here. This is 3 mana, 1 and then 2 Orzhov hybrids for a 3/2 cat nightmare. So I love this creature already. So my 2 favorite creature types, basically. It has Companion. Each permanent card in your starting deck has converted mana cost 2 or less. This creature has lifelink, and during each of your turns, you may cast 1 permanent spell with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard. This is dope. Note that even though the restriction is 2 or less, as far as casting costs, it's only permanent, so you can still play permanent spells, instants and sorceries and whatnot that cost 3, 4, 5 mana, whatever you want. So that's really cool. And when it comes to, the restriction in terms of creatures that we can and can't play, I will say this keeps us from playing Ghostwriter and Midnight Reaper, which kind of sucks in the deck that I want to play it in. But obviously I want to play it in the Cruel Celebrant, Corpse Knight, Priest of Forgotten Gods deck. Because when you sacrifice stuff to Priest, you can get it back the next turn, or you can just, get back Priest if it dies. That's great. You can get back Cruel Celebrants, anything else that you might happen to sacrifice to, say, a Witch's Oven, you can just get it right back. Note that, you can, God, how many other things? Just Gutter Bones, Cauldron Familiar. There are a ton of 1 and 2 drops that I want to play in this, but it's mostly Cruel Celebrant, Corpse Knight. I've been trying to make the Cruel Celebrant Orzhov Aristocrats deck work for like the last 6 months, and it's just a step behind, even with stuff like Ghostwriter, Midnight Reaper, Nightmare Shepherd, and all that. I think that not being able to play those cards is a huge hit for the deck, but being able to get back the key creatures that you really rely on to build a board state, like Cruel Celebrant and Corpse Knight in that deck, is going to be a huge deal. So I really, really like this thing. Kind of an awful lot. Oh, you can also still play like Revival Revenge if you wanted to get your creatures back. So that's a non-creature you can play. I'm just thinking, like I said, this card's been around for like 1 minute at time of recording. So, I haven't had much time to focus on my thoughts, but I really want to play it in the sort of Orzhov Aristocrats deck. Again, there are issues because you can't play certain cards if you want to play this as your companion, but I think it might actually be worth it. And even if it's not your companion, by the way, you can just play it in your main deck. You can just do that and not worry about this restriction whatsoever, and now you just got a 3-drop that lets you get back a Cruel Celebrant or a Priest like every single turn, and that seems ridiculous, specifically for the Orzhov Aristocrats deck. And if you play this in the main, you still get to play Ghostwriter, Midnight Reaper, and all that. So I just really like this, and I'm going to immediately start brewing around it. The art is gorgeous, the creature types are amazing, and the actual text box too is really attractive for specifically the deck that I've been trying to make work for at least half of a year now. So I'm really excited about this card, if you can't tell. That's pretty much all from today so far, at least. It's been kind of a slow trickle compared to what we're used to this spoiler season so far today. But maybe they'll put out more cards. If so, maybe I'll jump back on the mic. I guess the only thing I haven't talked about that came out today is, Fierce Guardianship, the Commander spoiler from today. This thing is too good. Probably. This card looks like a problem to me, and I guess that's all I'll say about it. Free counterspell for Commander, because that'll make people so happy. But aside from that, I guess I'm done. So let me know how you felt about all the takes down there in the comments section. Anything I missed? Any sort of crazy banana nut bread combos that I somehow didn't notice? It's happened before. You know, the Felidar Guardian Saheeli combo that went infinite and just, you know, destroyed standard until it had to get banned. That combo, I completely missed that combo when Felidar Guardian got spoiled. So it's definitely happened before, and it'll probably happen again. So let me know if I missed anything down there in the comments section. And yeah, any reason that you like the cards that I didn't touch on, I'm all ears. I read your comments, especially during spoiler season. I love reading comments. But aside from that, I guess I'm done. So do all the stuff I asked you to do at the beginning. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Hit up the Patreon. $1 a month is all I ask. That will let you vote on what decks you want to see first this season. That's a pretty good thing to be able to do for only $1 a month. And yeah, also if you want to pre-order any of this stuff, go to the link in the description. That'll head you over to TCG Player. If you order anything through that link, it pays you due. So it helps me out a lot. But I guess I'm done. It doesn't feel like I should be done. This is a really short spoiler video compared again to what we're used to. Kind of want to talk more about Magic cards, but maybe I'll get that chance later on today. Either way, I'll definitely see y'all tomorrow. Come chill on the couch with me. I've been Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.